Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, this Menachot daf Kuf Vav. We are going to begin on Kuf Vav Amud Aleph, where the Gemara asked the question that when a person made a promise to bring a mincha, as we saw in yesterday's daf, which is the new parak, and he didn't remember exactly what he was supposed to bring, he couldn't remember what it was. So, depending on what he said, there's a machlokas exactly how many minchas is he bringing, etc. So, we asked a question that maybe he should also have the doubt regarding minchas nesachim. Maybe he was supposed to do that because, as it says here, so maybe he should have to bring a minchas nesachim. So we end up saying it's not necessary because kika b'safkele, the only time you would have a suffix, which is simin yachid beglal ubayne belug kamsa, so is ba beglal yachid. It's only something that comes by itself, an individual. Ba beglal tzibor will mustafkele. So there's 5 reasons why we would assume he only had an intention for a standard mincha, not for minchas nesachim, which is very different. First of all, it's brought as a communal mincha. Number 2 is kiko mesafkele ba beglal atzma ba beglal zevach lo mestafkele. So it accompanies another carbon. Kiko Mestavkele only is a doubt on something which is two in the Lavaina. Shin to Lavaina lo Mestavkele. So Menachot Nesachim does not require Lavaina. Kiko Mestavkele ba belug. A regular mincha brings 1 lug of oil. Ba b'shleish lugin lo Mestavkele. The Menachot Nesachim there's 3 lugin. And then lastly, Kiko Mestavkele to una kamitza. Shin to una kamitza lo Mestavkele. However, when it comes to the minchas nesachim, it does not require kamitza, so this isn't a question. So then the Mishnah said, Pirashti mincha shel esrainim. So he said that I separated a mincha, I specified shel esrainim, a certain amount of esronim. However, the Mishnah said, Enyo kama pirashti, I don't remember how much, so we have this machlokas, which we'll understand a little bit better. It says Yomi shishim isaron. He brings 60 isaron. We'll see if that just means 60 or maybe more. And Rabbi Omer says Yomi minchas menachos shel esrainos me'echad v'ad shishim. He has to bring 60 separate minchas, each 1 through 60, because it has to be the exact amount in the kli. So we're going to understand this now a little bit better. Tanu Rabbanan. So, Pirashti Mincha. I definitely designated I was going to bring a Mincha. V'kavati b'kli echad. Shel esrainim. And I wanted to go into 1 kli, which we know a kli, the maximum esrainim that can go into a kli is 60. And it was shel esrainim. So, V'eni odea my Pirashti, but I don't remember what it is. This is a golden rule why you should remember these types of things. So Yavi mincha shel shishim esrainim. So divrei chachamim, you put in 60, right? Something with 60 esrainim, because again that's the total. That's the most you can possibly have. Rabbi Omer Yavi mincha shel esrainim. You have to bring minchas of esrainim mechad vad shishim, from 1 to 60, and then it gives this unbelievable number shin elef ushmayna meos ushleishim, which the total end up being 1,830 isarin. So if you look in Rashi, Shelvi shishim menachos, you have to bring 60 mincha offerings, b'shishim kalim, in 60 different vessels, b'chad kli, in 1 kli you put chad isaron, uve'idach shnayim, uve'idach shloisha, uve'idach arba, v'chein ad shishim. So if you would keep on going in that direction, ends up being 1,830. Says Rashi, v'chol kli, because in each kli yomer im kazun nedarti zunu nedari v'im lav tehei nedava the mamarav shachad minayu nadar. So that's what you have to do. You end up not knowing how much, so you end up having to bring 1,830 because you have to go from 1 to 60, and if you do the math, that's basically what it is. If you think about it logically, How do you come up with that? So the mean between 1 and 60 is 30, right? So if you multiply 30 times 60, that's 1800. So, but it's actually 1830. So that gives you a ballpark of how it's figured out. So you can just trust me that that's the right number, or at least trust the Gemara. Anyway, and then the Gemara says, Pirashti, I definitely designated. Ve'eni yodea ma pirash, don't remember anything. Ve'ezu mehem pirashti, ve'eni yodea kama pirashti. I don't even know how many. So, yavi chamish menachos. There's 5 different types of mincha offerings. The machvas, the marcheshes, the chalois, rokik, soilus. So, but you have to bring 5 shel shishim, 60 shishim esrainim. Shehin shalosh meyos. So it'll end up being 300. Why? Because you have to put in a 6. That's divrei chachamim. Why? Because you have 5 different menachos of each type, and it gets to the maximum of 60. So 5 times 60 is 300. There's a lot. Go listen to this. Rabbi already know yavi chamish menachos. It's true. You have to bring 5 types, but it's shel shishim esrainim me'echad v'ad shishim shehem tisha alafim umeya v'chamishim. That ends up being 9,150. So if you do the math, like 1,800 times 5, 1836, 72 is 9,000. 30 times 5 is 150. So basically, if we're dealing with 1 min, it's 1,830. Then you have to multiply 1,830 times 5, right? And that ends up getting to the 9,150 isaron, which is a lot. But that's what it says here. It says that in this situation, that's what Rabbi would require. Shehein tisha lafim 9,000 umeya 100 v'chamishim. Okay, so these are where these numbers come from. So, but my kimifli, what exactly is this machlokas chacham of the Rabbi? So there's a few answers. Are you allowed to bring chulin, which most people think obviously you can't, but apparently it's a machlokas. Rabbi savar also haknas chulin la'azar, Rabbanan savar mutal haknas chulin la'azar. So what exactly is this machlokas? Says Rashi. So everyone will hold that you're not allowed to mix a chiyuv with a nedava, so they all have to be separate. But the Rabbanan hold it's mutter to bring chulin to the azara. Hilkach yavi shishim isaron b'kli achad. You put 60 into one kli, vayitna, and you bring the whole thing. Im kul in the dark, and you say if the whole thing is, then my nether kulam chiyat l'chavaisi. So it's a whole chiyuv. The imlav mashin the dark to l'chavasi. Let's say it was 20. So that 20 will be for my chayib. Uveshar chulin. Abba hashar l'nedava lo matzil suye. You can't say it's a nedava. Dasal arav chayva b'nedava, because you can't mix the two, right? You can't mix chayv with nedava. You skip a few lines down. It says kaimitz b'daita the kain tali milsa the kain daita a kaidish v'lo chulin. So when he does the kmitz, it's only his das is only on whatever it possibly could be of kadosh and not chulin. So therefore, he says you could do that. However, the Rebbe says you're not allowed to. Hilkach lo matzilei sui b'kli echad. You can't put it all into one kli and say, okay, well, some of this is kadosh, some is not, and to make such a condition. Avol yavi shishim menachos mi'echad v'ad shishim. You have to go 60 menachos from 1 to 60 for shishim kalim and 60 different kalim, and you basically make the net. You say whatever netter it is, they'll be for my chayiv, and all these other ones will be a nedava, right? So therefore, but you can't make a nedava if they're mixed together. Okay, so that's the idea behind it. Rashi asks a question, but that's the first interpretation of the nafkamina, of the machlokas rather. So again, b'mutal haknas chol nazar community Rabbi Savar also haknas chol nazar Rabbanan Savar mutal haknas chol nazar. Rabbi Omer the kol yalma also haknas chol nazar. He says no, you definitely are not allowed to. V'hacha b'mutal ariv chayva b'nedava community. Rabbanan Savar mutal ariv chayva b'nedava. Rabbi Savar also ariv chayva b'nedava. So he said, if you put it all in one kli, right? So, and it's possible that if you didn't actually made the neder for all 60, so then there is a mixture of chulin and kodesh. Are you allowed to do that? The Rabban say yes, and the Rabbi says no. That's answer number 2. So that if you can put it all in one kli, I don't understand. You need to do 2 kmitzas. So your answer is, so how does this work, right? How are you able to pull this off? It says Rashi, chadlu chayva, v'chadlu nedava, right? So you can't. There's 2 separate types of things. One's for a chayva, one's for a nedava. The answer is, you're right. The kametz v'hada kametz. You actually do it twice. You do a kmitza 2 times. I have a kametz v'chayva on the nedava chayva, right? So maybe you're going to take the wrong flour, if you will, the chayv flour, and where it's supposed to be nedava. The answer is not. We're not worried about that. The tolile badas kayin. It's almost like Islay Brera, you would think that would be part of the answer. But basically he's saying, no, we go bust through the das of the Kayin. And therefore the Kayin takes, so in this machshav, he's like, I'm taking for Chayv. Now I'm taking for Nadava. That works. The Yomer kol heichadamati yadi, the Kayin, hashta Chayva, u'b'sayv Nadava. So whatever he takes the first time will be Chayv, the second will be Nadava. Okay, so that avoids the Kmitza issue. Vakturi heichi makater. But how can you do haktara? How could you burn it? So likder in the dava bereisha. Let's say you end up burning, because you have to burn it on the mizbeach, the kmitza. Okay, you screw up, but how do you do this? If let's say you were makter in the dava first, the chayva, and ends up being really a chayva, hecha mekatila, dilmakul chayvahi. Maybe the whole 60 is an obligation, and really the nedava, there is no nedava. V'chasul hu shirayim. It ends up missing out, because if in fact there was no nedava, it was all chiyuv, so then what you took out is really supposed to be shirayim. It's not part of another separate carbon, because there's no nedava in this case, possibly. Shirayim shechasru ben kamitza v'lachatara in mekater kamitza land. So even though it's true that shirayim are not ma'akev, but the shirayim have to be around and not missing anything, at least from the time between the kamitza is scooped up and you actually burn it. So until that time, it's a problem. So the kater chayva bereisha, the nedava heicha mekatua. And if flipping it on its head, the other way is a problem also, as we continue on the base. Because v'dilma kul chayvahi, as we said, maybe everything's an obligation. V'chol shehu mimenu ishim harihu b'bal taktiru. So there's an issue that whatever you burn, you can't. You burn on the mizbech, but everything else is the issue of bal taktiru, says Rashi. Once you do the first kemitza, everything else is leftovers. The nedava, when you do it a second time, and you do haktar with that, lo havi kamakter shirayim. It's considered, you're not allowed to do that, right? It's an issue of bal taktiru. So how do you get around this? So maybe the Rabbi Shimon Hazi, don't worry, there is a way, and this is a famous answer. So your machshav is, I'm burning this as like firewood, so therefore that's allowed. It's an issue of bringing up reich nechoach, so therefore it would be mutter if you have that machshav. Okay, so let's look at question 13. Pirashti mincha b'kliyachad. The end of the kami Israelim. So b'mapli reba rabbanan. If it's this or it's that. So the Gemara says 4 oifanim b'gemara. So either is it mutter to bring chulin to the azara? Is it mutter to have in one kli chayv and nedava? Is a machlokes if ikol isaron boy lug shemen. Okay, we didn't finish this. Well, so we only did 2 of the answers. Okay, well, let's keep moving. So Amalei Rav Achamare de Rava Rav Ashi v'Dilma de Kuliyama Matul Arv Chayva Munadava. Maybe really everyone holds that you could put them all in one kli. So then why does Rabbi say this other din? V'hacha b'Rabbi Elazar kamefagi. The Rabbanan isu the Rabbi Elazar. The Rabbi Leisla the Rabbi Elazar. Maybe this is totally on this whole notion of can you be makter it with shame eitzim? If it's so, then it's okay. But if not, it's problematic. Certainly no. If you want to tell me that Rabbi holds you could put them together, with the Rebbe Eliezer Leisley, but he has a hold of this Eitzim thing. So Efshir the Macy Shitin B'chad Mana. Possibly you can put 6 in one kli. B'chad Mana and 1 in 1 mana. Umagulahu, and the vessels will be like touching them. The komets, and then you would do Kamitzel, Rashi, the komets Megadol Beresha, do the big one first. Umas, then you make the following condition. Ikul Chayva Shaper. The Ilo had the Kimtzana Lahavi Mechayva. My Kamitzel will become from Chayv. Umaydim Kamitzel Mekli Shani, the Kamitzel from the other Kli, which is just a little. Lavi Ahu Isaron, that one Isaron, Los in the Dava, the Pash Mekli Echad, Umaga. Magin L'Roisha Kalim Zumatzadzu, they're right next to each other today. Shigu Roshi Hakolosais. Okay. So Rabbi Aimer the Kuli Yalma Motalar Chayvim and Adava. The Kuli Yalma Yisahu the Rebbe Eliezer. The Bahacha but Plukta the Rebbe Eliezer and Yaakov the Rabbanim Kamefli. Did none. Afilu Mincha Shul Samichi Saron, even if we have a Mincha, which is the maximum amount of 60 Saron, the Noisin Los Samach Lug, you put into Noisin Los Samach Lug. You put into it 60 lug, which means that you put in 1 lug of oil per isaron, flour. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Mafil mincha shel shishim isaron, even if it's in fact a lot of flour, ein lo ela luga. You only put in 1 lug, so it's not 1 lug proportional for each isaron, but 1 lug no matter what. Shenemru la minchas la mincha v'lug shemen. So Rabbanan Savri Rabbanan Diamri Samach lug. He holds. You got to do 60. The whole chad v'chad isaron luga kashakel, and therefore each isaron he has to take 1 lug. Rabbi Savar Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov there ain't no elo luga. You only put in 1. V'yadinan ichada minchahi. You don't know if it's 1 mincha. The sagile b'chad lug, and therefore if it's 1 lug, you only have to put in. If it's only 1 mincha, you don't put in 1 lug. Ishtei menachos, then who if it's 2, then to be then shtei lugin. So the machlokas, if one pledges a small carbon and brings a large. Okay, we're not up to that yet. Okay, so that is another question, because if in fact you always bring proportional 1 for each isaron, so it doesn't make any difference. But according to this other shita, it's all totally on each mincha. Each mincha only brings 1. So the question is it 1 mincha or is it 2? And therefore it becomes problematic if it's all in 1 kli. So that's the third answer. It just says kli isaron boy lug shemen o kol mincha. Okay, and then finally, Rav Ashi Omer, he gives a 4th answer. Pikatan, a small carbon, the heavy gadol, and he ends up bringing a large carbon. Kamifki. Rabbanan Savri Katan the heavy gadol yatsa, Rabbi Savri lo yatsa. So basically, if one pledges a small carbon and he ends up bringing a large carbon, you fulfill the obligation even though it isn't exactly as he pledged, right? So the question is, because you were making a promise to do a small thing, it ends up becoming larger, so does that work? So I've off-legal b'chad zimna. We already had that before. Did not. Katan, you made a pledge for a small and heavy gadol yatsa. Rabbi Yomi yatsa. We already had this. Svichadiyin marbaha b'hakayim rabbanan misham di'idi kaimetsu. Avol hasam the kanafishi emurim. You're increasing the sacrificial parts. Ema maidale Rabbi. Maybe in that situation he would agree to Rabbi or not yatsa. The yimar bahi kaimer Rabbi Abba Baha Ema maidale rabbanan sricha. Someone etzam zahav yain oila taida shur. Okay. We're gonna see. We're gonna go further, but let's see if there's another question here. TA 25. Pirashti mincha. Ve'eni yodea kama pirashti. Chachamim armi yavi mincha shel shishim esrainim. Ve'yitna shahashar yin nedava. Oman diyar med aser lahakter shirayim afil l'shem eitzim o mahani. Mata kanato bezeh. Okay, so Yavi says Yavi shishim bekli echad, brings 60 in 1 kli. Va'odi sarim bekli echad umagbahu v'kaimetz mishnei umakter. Right, so that's what we said over here, which is a little bit confusing, but this is the answer. Very difficult answer to remember this, but this we just saw that. Again, what you could do is Afshir Demaisi Shitin Bechad Mana, Umagalahu, their vessels are touching the kaimitz, and they're touching one another, and you do the kamitzah. So that's what it's basically saying. Even though it's also lahakter shirayim, I feel ashamed eitzim won't work, but still, what you could do again is you have one kli which is filled up with 60, and another one with just a kli with just one isaron, and they're touching each other, and you do kamitzah from both of them, and you're makter it. Okay, so that's that. TB 28 Parashi Mincha V'Kavati B'Kli Echad. So same question as question 13. This is TB 28. So I wrote Chol Sheniktos Sul Azara L'Arav Chiyuv B'Nadava Kama Shemen Sarech L'Havi Im Echad L'Chol V'Chol Echad V'Echad L'Chol Yisaron O Rak L'Chol Mincha. Okay, or Din Katan B'Carbon Gadol. Okay, a little bit vague, but maybe they gave me credit on that. Okay, let's keep moving. Next Mishnah. Harilai Eitzim. Person says, I'm going to bring wood. So Yivchais Mishtei Gezirim. So you have to bring at least 2 blocks of wood. Lavaina. So I'm going to bring some frankincense. So Yivchais B'Kaimitz. So it's got to be at least the amount of a kaimitz. Chamisha Kamatzim. There's actually 5 situations where you have kamitza. Ha'aymer Olai Lavaina. So Yivchais B'Kaimitz. If a person says, I'm going to bring Lavaina, so it has to be at least a kaimitz worth. Haminadev Mincha. A person who says, I'm going to bring a mincha, Yavi Ima Kaimitz Lavaina, he has to bring with it a kaimitz of Lavaina. Hamalas a kaimitz B'chutz Chayiv. Someone who brings the kmitza outside the chayiv. Shnei bezichin, the 2 bezichin by the lechem upon him, tu'unin shnei kamatzim, they knew 2 kmitzas. Fine. Harilai zahav. A person says, I'm going to bring some gold to the base of Mikdash. So, lo yivchais mediner zahav. It's got to be a dinner zahav. If you say I'm going to bring kesef, lo yivchais mediner kesef. Nechayishes lo yivchais mimma kesef. So you have to bring at least a ma of silver. Pirashdi, I know I explained myself, I know the name of Pirashdi, I can't remember. Say maybe ad shiyomer lo kachnes chavanti. You have to basically go as high until the point of saying, there's no way I would have offered this. There's no way it went up to $1 million, right? So you have to figure out, well, maybe I'll give 100, I'll give 1,000. There's no way I'm giving 100,000. So you have to go all the way up until the point where you basically are going to say, there's no way I would have gotten any further that high. All right. Let's see the Gemara. Tanaban. So the pasuk says carbon. The pasuk says nefesh ki sakriv carbon mincha, which again it says the word nefesh, which is unusual, which we saw before. Malamin shemisnadvin. 8. It means that you can even give a donation of wood. For kama, what is the minimum? Shnei gezirin, as we said in the Mishnah, 2 blocks of wood. The chenu oimer, as it says in the Nehemiah, v'hagoralois hiflalnu al carbon ha'etzim, that the lottery, it fell on the carbon eitzim. Rabbi oimer eitzim carbon haim. You know that eitzim are actually called like a carbon, and therefore tu'udin melech. You need to actually put salt, like every carbon called karbancha takriv melech, so wood also needs salt. Tu'udin hagasha. It needs to be brought to the southwestern corner of the mizbeach, like many karbanos. Amar Rabbi v'divrei Rabbi eitzim tu'unin kamitza. According to him, you would actually need to do kamitza as well, just like other mincha offerings. So Amar Papa v'divrei Rabbi eitzim srichim eitzim. According to him, if you have wood, you would need to bring more wood. Says Rashi, eitzim shemis nadiv adam tu'unin eitzim lahasikan be'atzi hektish kishar karbanos. You need wood to be able to burn your carbon, which is the carbon is eitzim. Okay. Well, vayna liivchais min akaimitz. It's got to be at least a kaimitz worth. Minol dechsiv the hermi min bekum soy that you will bring up from its kaimitz misaylas mincha umishamna. Yes, kol halavayna. So we see makash lavayna. We can make a connection lavayna laharma. The mincha to a mincha ma haram the mincha kaimitz af lavayna nami kaimitz. Just like the mincha, of course, we do kmitza. So too, when it comes to the lavayna, the minimum is a kmitza worth. Tanabanim hari laylam mizbech. I am going to bring something to the mizbech. So yavi lavayna. So he's going to bring lavayna. Why that? Shenucha davar shekar b'gam mizbech elo lavayna. There's the only thing that's completely burnt, that there's nothing left. So when you said I'm going to bring him something on the mizbech, it must be something that the whole thing will be on the mizbech and nothing else. So pirashti, I specified the odiyama pirashti. So you have cold davar shekar b'mizbech. I had to bring everything. The suleika ika oil. Carbon oil is complete. It's kolil. So why would you say it's the case? Must be that it's lavayna. Maybe it's an oil. That's also completely burnt up. It's not true because ika oil kohanim. The hides of the carbon oil are given to the kohanim. So there is something as opposed to lavayna, which is nothing. Ika oil sa'of. Also oil sa'of is completely burnt up. So and it's not. There's no hides to give to a kayin. So our answer is ika as we continue to cook zayin and alf. Moirav and noitza. The crope and its feathers are removed and they're not put onto the mizbech. Ika nesachim. That's completely poured onto the mizbech. Yeah, but it goes l'shisin. It goes down the pipes. Asli. Va'ika minchas nesachim. Kivan di'ika mincha di'achli kohanim minei lupsikale. So even though it's true minchas kohanim, minchas nesachim are completely put on the mizbech, but since a mincha in which is consumed by the kohanim, we just don't make any exceptions. As Rashi, delema davar hakarv kulu mizbech mishum minchas nesachim. However, ika minchas nedava the eno kulu mizbech. Minchas nedava is not put on the is not completely put on the mizbech. So therefore, probably when he said it, it couldn't have been. Probably wasn't referring about minchas nesachim. He was probably referring to lavayna. Hariolai zahav yivchais mediner zahav so vidilma nascha. Maybe a big chunk of gold, a big bar of gold. So I'm Rabbi Lazar Diamar Matbeya. He mentioned like a coin, a mintage. So it wasn't a bar. I have a dilma priti. Maybe it's just a little inexpensive coin. Papa priti did the hava loy abdi inshi. They don't make it that way. Kesev yivchais mediner vidilma nascha. Maybe it's a bar of silver. So I'm Rabbi Lazar again Diamar Matbeya. I mentioned a coin. Vidilma priti, maybe it's this cheapy coin. And Rav Sheshes ba'ator deloy saga priti de kasba. They don't make them out of silver. The chayishes liyivchayis memo kesef. If you mention copper, it's got to be a mo worth of silver. Tanya belezmin yankav liyivchayis mitzinor katana shel nechayishes. It shouldn't be any less than a small fork which is made out of copper. So my chazia. So what is the benefit of having a little fork? Rabbi shemit chatatin ba pasilois, that we can use it to take off the tips of the wicks, and kanchin ba nerois, and it cleans out the lamps. And this is a Gemara in Shabbos. Barzel, I remember the first time I learned this is in Shabbos, and it talks about ravens, as we'll see, and it was that I had a test on the day of the Super Bowl, and the Baltimore Ravens were playing, and this is one of the Gemara questions. It's funny how you remember this from like 10 years ago. So Tanya Cherem Oymel Yivchais Mikalia Oyrev, the special item to get ravens. We don't want ravens hanging out on the base of Mikdash, so we had these like spiky pieces of metal in certain places so they wouldn't sit on the top of the roofs. Vikama, how big was that? So Rabbi Yosef Amal Alma. So an Alma by Alma, Igadi Amal Yivchais Ma'amal Alma Ma'chazi Rabbi Yosef Likali Oyrev. Again, it was served to get those pesky ravens away from us. They won that year. Question 14. Ha'imr b'stama hariyalai l'mizbeach. What does it mean? And what's the reason? So he says it's lavayna shenucha davar shekarb kul mizbeach el lavayna. That's the only possible situation. Even an oil is something which is not completely burnt, etc. Question TA26. We did not do that yet. Question TB 29. 9. We'll see that tomorrow on Khan.